moment, we are still digging.
Court's decision to dismiss the acclaimed chief investigating magistrate on the grounds of bias is certain to raise a storm of protest throughout the country. The families of the victims of the paedophile ring listened as the court brought down its ruling. To them, Magistrate Jean-Marc Connerot, who became a national hero after saving 2 children from a secret dungeon belonging to a convicted child rapist.
In 1995, Belgian police searched a house connected to a man who had already been convicted of abducting and abusing young girls, and they found nothing. So they left, but inside that same house, inside a concealed space in the basement, there were victims. 2 of them, Sabine Dardenne and Laetitia Delges, would later be found hidden behind a false wall in that cellar. And during one of those earlier searches, reports at the time noted investigators heard what they believed were children's voices and dismissed them. Imagine, you spent months in a dungeon, being in complete darkness, with no sense of time and no way out. Until suddenly you hear footsteps, voices, sirens. It's the police. They're right there. You scream as loud as you can. You hit the walls. You do anything to gain their attention. And then they leave. That shouldn't happen, but it did. And once you understand how that happened, this case stops being about one man and starts to become something much harder to explain.
Could you please give us your name?
Jeffrey Epstein.
Marc Dutroux wasn't invincible. He wasn't some unknown predator hiding in the shadows. By the time the kidnappings that shocked Belgium in 1995 and 1996, he was already known to the authorities, not because they suspected him, but rather because they had already convicted him. He had already been convicted of abducting, imprisoning, and violently harming 5 girls and young women, and sentenced to prison. A serious sentence, the kind that's supposed to put someone like that away from society for a very long time. But he didn't serve all of it. Instead, he was released years before completing his sentence. Think about that. A man convicted of crimes like that, back out, back into society, back into the same environment. And before long, warning signs started to appear. Not one, several. Separate pieces of information were gathered by the people around him, including his own mother. She reportedly warned authorities that he had kidnapped 2 girls and was keeping them at his house. What happened next would become one of the darkest failures in the history of Belgium. anyone could have called it a mistake, a missed search, a bad assumption, or maybe just a moment where investigators heard something and got it wrong. But later, the failures in this case were no longer treated like an isolated mistake. They became the backbone of an investigation into the investigation itself. That's when the story changes, because now the question isn't just what Mark Dutroux did, but rather how a monster like that was able to go on for so fucking long. On paper, Dutroux was not supposed to be influential. He was unemployed, receiving government benefits, and yet owned 7 houses and several vehicles. That raises another question. Did he have connections to a larger criminal network? Then came the claims at the trial. Dutroux would later say he was not acting alone. Rather, his defense argued he was working for a child prostitution ring spanning the entirety of Europe. Comparably, during the trial, reveals were made about DNA evidence and about the people connected to the case. Does this remind you of someone?
Jeffrey Epstein.
A different country, perhaps. A different case, but the same kind of question. How many coincidences does it take before people stop believing this was just chance?